Good morning. I'm Sarah Bean, editor of FMJ, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar, Staying on Top of Safety. A core remit for facilities managers is in maintaining a safe working environment, yet research from Watco found over a third of FMs have been affected by slips, trips and falls in the last year. Alongside this, a lack of employee awareness and adequate time for repairs has had a negative impact on safety. So, how can FMs maintain a safe workplace, whether a commercial office, manufacturing plant, retail site, or educational facility, while balancing budgets and workloads? We've brought a panel of experts together with experience in the introduction and management of health and safety in complex and demanding environments. They can provide valuable insights into maintaining a safe workplace. I'll be putting a series of questions to the panel, but would also love your input. So please do post any queries or comments, and we'll get to them towards the end of the session. I'd like to start by getting the panel to introduce themselves and their organisations. If we could start with you, Chris.
Hi there, I'm Chris Budd, European Sales Director for Watco, overseeing the UK, French and German offices that we run.
Brilliant. And Phil?
Morning, I'm Phil Pinnington. I'm Head of Audit and Consultancy of the British Safety Council. We're a non-profit organisation that provides audit, training, consultancy within health and safety. Been around for 60 plus years. Built some best practice standards around that, not only in the UK, but Middle East and also Southeast Asia.
Brilliant. And we've got Nick.
Hi everybody, my name's Nick Bray. I'm head of HSEQ for ISS UK and Ireland. ISS are a global FM provider working across 30 countries with around 325,000 people.
Brilliant. And I'm delighted to say Jenni's joining us too, and she's on the client side.
So hi everybody, I'm Jenni and I'm Director of Estates and Facilities for a social enterprise called Provide. We deliver health and social care services across the country, and also within my remit sits health and safety for the entire organisation. So nice to see you
all. Brilliant. Can we sort of set the scene a bit? So Chris, Watco's done a series of reports that have explored FM's priorities regarding safeties and specifically as well on repairs and maintenance. Can you just give us a brief overview of some of the main issues that you uncovered?
Yeah, absolutely. So the research, we had a large number of participants within it, and gave us quite a lot of really important information. So, I mean, a third of facilities managers came back that they were concerned with the budget cuts posing risks to safety within their businesses. We had just over a third, so 36%. Are already saying that their business regularly goes over budget on urgent repair work to remove hazards. And then, other really large figures, nearly a quarter said that a lack of general maintenance and repair often poses a safety risk. And then the really big one, 40%, so almost half, struggle to find the time to actually complete the repair jobs as soon as they're spotted. So really highlighting some big sort of issues and concerns.
It's not good. I mean, Phil, obviously, the BSC has been campaigning for health and safety for years, and the last thing you want to see in any site is just lots of sort of beware signs and areas that people cannot go because they haven't got down to repairing them. Now, it's interesting because you celebrated the 50-year anniversary of the introduction of Health and Safety Act, and I'm really interested to know what are the key challenges now, because Health and Safety Act initially was to do with accidents at work, and yet they're still happening.
You're right. I mean, it was a significant milestone, and the world is a different place, as we know from 50 years ago. We've matured a lot. I think we've got the better part of the bargain globally because we've been through the process of really understanding. And I would go so far as to say we're probably still the sort of standard bearers of this going forward. What the challenges we have currently, I think, overwhelmingly, is the building safety regulations. As most people will know, we've got the regulations, we've got the regulator, we've got the advice, but any statutory instrument, and the health and safety workout was a good example of this. Until it actually has to be applied, people still don't know what does this actually mean. And from a facilities point of view, it's a really big one. I mean, I've worked within facilities myself in my career for about 8 or 9 years, and it's an ongoing issue, an ongoing challenge. What are we actually expected to do? What are we going to do? How are we going to do it? And unfortunately, as I say, it's going to have to wait until the first prosecution to really understand, right, okay, this is what we have to do. And there's a lot of chatter, and I'm sure everybody's seen all the sort of updates and stuff. And I think we're still in that developmental stage, but we are at a further step forward than others within this field. So we sort of get it. We know what the direction of travel is. We just have to know at what point do we cross the precipice of, right, okay, this is what we're going to do. But that I think for me is going to be one of the biggest challenges for the next couple of years, unfortunately.
You're absolutely right, Nick. Good to get expertise in from the services provider side, and I know you oversee that area, but you've also worked in FM. I mean, it's a huge question. It's a ridiculously huge question. What do you see as the main issues for FMs when you're talking to clients, when they start talking to you about health and safety and on the compliance side?
Yeah, good question. As Chris and Phil already touched on, right, FMs have got a really tough job. I work with them every single day. They're the fulcrum between the customer, their own teams, and their service provider, so that they've got a lot of information coming in from different directions. And when I talk to customers, it's really around 3 main things that they want from their FM provider. One is keep you compliant, right? So for an FM, that's good overview of building data, understanding where gaps are or remedial actions that need to be taken, making sure they've got a really strong, flexible supply chain if they haven't got the resources in-house to deliver the services to their customer, and being able to provide that data back to the customer to understand where investment might be needed, where assets may need to be managed in a different way, or where we can use technology to sort of enhance the longevity of those assets in a building. The second area is really keep my people safe. So that's thinking about proactive communication with customer staff as well as their own within the FM team, really driving that and leading the customer on innovation and best practice from other customers that you may have in your FM portfolio within a similar segment or in a different segment where something's worked, and bringing in that best practice and innovation to your customer on site. And the third thing is, how do we improve? So like I said, using more efficient ways of working, understanding how we get the best value out of the services that we're delivering for our customers, and then understanding how we can add value to their building and their people by understanding what projects we can bring, where we can use technology and investment to help them really target what's going to work best for their teams, especially when property space now is being used in a different way post-pandemic, and we've got a different mix of sort of occupancy across a lot of especially our private customers in their estates.
That's really interesting, getting that overview of it. And I like the idea you said about the people sharing best practice. Now, Jenny, in your situation, you are managing both an in-house and an outsourced team, and you're working in healthcare. So there's a lot to think about from your point of view.
There is indeed. So some of our key challenges in this respect, I mean, predominantly our biggest one is lone working, and we work over multiple sites. So, we have a lot of staff who lone work, and they're in remote locations because we're quite a rural area where we cover, and they work out of hours as well. So there's some challenges in managing that. For us as well, in terms of the buildings we work at for that FM side, we are in the healthcare sector, so we do work out of a lot of NHS sites, and there, as I'm sure we're all aware, some historic issues with these buildings. So we're working out of very old buildings, so it's very difficult and we have to work with our landlords and things to kind of ensure those buildings are safe, and that's difficult because there's historically underinvestment. And I think just for us, it's the communication as well, because we do have so many lone workers, and it's and home workers as well, especially after the pandemic. It's kind of getting that message out to them that health and safety is actually everyone's responsibility, and just getting some ownership as well around that too.
That's a good point, that the idea that health and safety is everyone's responsibility, and that's something that comes up again and again, doesn't it? Just keeping everyone motivated. Just a reminder to delegates to post questions, and if any of you have experienced this problem of trying to communicate with staff on their health and safety responsibilities, I'd love to hear. And another big general question, but at the moment, what are the most important considerations regarding health and safety in the workplace? And that can cover a multitude of different types of workplaces. I mean, if I start with Chris, based on some of the research you did, what were the sort of things that were flagged up to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's finding a balance of proactive and reactive maintenance to ensure that obviously health and safety hazards are well managed and dealt with in good time, whether that's floor damage, storage, material handling equipment that can introduce potential hazards. And I mean, bearing in mind it's the UK, it's the weather as well. So if that's slippery conditions outdoors or leaking roofs with water coming into areas, I think those are the main ones there. And obviously the goal is to reduce the likelihood of impact of hazards to ensure all of the facilities, if it's the public or employees, that can operate safely.
I mean, Phil, would you say that when the consideration, people think about the workplace as offices, but it's not just offices, it's a variety of places. I mean, my absolute, this is just plucking this out of nowhere, I would think that on a manufacturing plant, health and safety might be in some ways a lot tighter because it's a big plant situation. But in other areas like people facing retail, healthcare, hospitals, places like that, it must be an absolute nightmare because you're dealing not just with workers, but you're also dealing with members of the public.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the I guess you hit the nail right on the head. The manufacturing bit, you have very clear structural you must do because equipment will wear out, and it needs maintenance, it needs observation and checking and stuff like. When you've got that sort of public facing or the people centric type of operations, if you like, it's very much about that cooperation. And I think just going back to Jenni's point, the stakeholder appreciation that actually you are your brother's keeper, what you do can influence someone else's outcome. Being part of that, getting people to understand actually, if there is something, just speak up, say something. In the days where there was that perception of health and safety is not my responsibility, all I have to do is put a sign saying wet floor. That's me done. Those have gone. The culture's changed now because people do see actually it's not me who might be affected, it could be somebody else, and the impact to them could be quite significant. So I think what we're seeing a lot more now, we're certainly pushing it, is that collaboration, getting people to actually understand and don't just go, oh, it's health and safety, because we know historically that will just switch them off. They're not interested. You have to be saying, okay, this is the potential impact, and put it into real terms. Not, oh, you know what, if you don't do this, somebody's going to be going to slip and they're going to be in hospital for 6 months in traction. Don't get into that nonsense. Get into the reality. This is going to affect these people. Because one thing I remember, and anecdotally, it's so it always sticks in my mind. The first day of my training, when I did my NEBOSH, my instructor gave a very clear statement. He said, nobody goes to work purposely to injure other people. And I think that's a really important point. As human beings, we don't do things just because, let's really put someone else in danger. And I think what we don't work enough on is that, recognizing people don't do this on purpose, but they need to understand. And that goes into that people piece. And that could be the general public, just as much as it is employees. Because, that mindset is a general societal mindset.
It's a good point. Jenni, obviously you're in healthcare, so you've got patients, you've got visitors, you've got staff. I mean, it must be probably the biggest headache, really, when you're dealing with also sick people as well, vulnerable people too.
So I mean, a big thing for us is falls and trips and slips. And quite a lot of our visitors to our sites, they're coming for MSK or the physio and things like that. So mobility is an issue. So there's stuff we have to do around that. I just wanted to just touch on one thing that's really made it quite difficult for us, and that's the fire safety. Hybrid working has added so much complexity to this. We've had to rethink our fire training, our fire marshals, because we're not having regular people coming into offices because of hybrid working. So that's made it very difficult. And then the other thing I just wanted to just highlight as well in consideration is, especially within our organisation, we find it's that lack of near miss reporting.
Yeah.
So that for us, we're really pushing that at the moment, because actually, that near miss incidents, if they are reported, you can kind of gain a picture before things get too bad. So that's a really big consideration for us at the moment.
Nick, what about your client base? What do people coming to you about their biggest concerns?
Well, from our customer base, it's around making sure that they're being listened to and their considerations are being undertaken. We have such a vast, diverse range of clients, from banking to production facilities, manufacturing facilities, and we have 10,000 placemakers working in the NHS in healthcare. So we've got a real wide variety of hazards that our people are exposed to. Just picking up on what Phil said there, we've seen a real spike in violence and aggression incidents over the last 18 months.
Right.
And it's something that we're really focusing on this year with 3 strands around training and competency, our own internal processes and leadership, to try and get a grip of our violence and aggression incidents. And that's something that we're driving culturally as well, through proactive engagement and leadership, talking to your frontline staff, talking with your customer, bringing people together and getting that engagement as a team to collaboratively look at the challenges and risks in the workplace and deal with them together, because it is a joint effort for an outsourcing provider. We haven't got all the answers. We need the customer on board to come and help us. And also learning from mistakes. Certainly when you work in an organisation as big as this, to try and change your corporate memory can sometimes be a challenge, just because of the enormity of the organisation. To make a real change takes everybody to be on part of it and really drive in the same direction. So really driving that culture and focusing on behaviours, because as Phil said, nobody comes to work to injure themselves or somebody else, but it's the behaviours that our leaders show and demonstrate every single day, which is reflected then in your workforce, and you can drive that real cultural change from a top-down approach, because that's where good culture change comes from.
That's a great point, that idea of the sort of corporate memory. That is actually something to really keep in mind. And I think you're right, this idea of
well, and it's difficult, right? Because we keep having the same type of incidents again and again. And you think, well, why is that? And it's because of the complexity of the organisation and driving through real change. And we talk about communication to frontline staff is really difficult, but even driving through change when it comes to procedures or ways of working is really difficult when you're talking about 32,000 people across the UK and Ireland. So appreciating that it takes time, but also keeping focus on it to make sure that we're measuring the right things to measure success, and also celebrating success, right? Because in our world, or in my world, I certainly have more negative conversations than I do positive ones. And it's about flipping the script and not blaming somebody for hurting themselves, right? So that's really important. We don't blame an individual for hurting themselves and say, that was your fault that happened. Flipping the conversation and say, okay, something's happened. How can we learn from it and drive those lessons across the organisation? It takes time, depending on how big your organisation is.
One thing, obviously, we're talking about a bit today is slips, trips, and falls. And I looked up the stats for the HSE. It's still the most common cause of injury. And I just wanted to get an idea of what are the factors that feed into that. I mean, Chris, obviously, your research uncovered lack of repair. So I suppose when you were dealing with some of these FMs, they'd literally, as I mentioned earlier, put like signage up saying, be careful. But then people are having to walk around something that needs to be repaired. And again, you might have issues then with egress and access and things like that. What kind of feedback did you get on that front?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's taken as simple steps as having an anti-slip or aggregated paint on the floor rather than just putting a smooth finish onto it. There's always the argument between the cleaning department and the health and safety department. Obviously, the cleaning department want not to put any disservice to you, Jenny, but an easier job. Of cleaning a surface, whereas and that would be a smooth finish paint or floor. But obviously, we need to provide anti-slip or slip-resistant surfaces so people don't slip and trip on it as well. But I mean, 30 from the research we did, 37% of respondents said that the business had been affected by slips, trips, and falls in the past year. And also, as Jenny mentioned, about near misses. So it's important about the team's awareness of the hazards. And 28% of the respondents disagreed that employees are aware of potential hazards in a facility and know how to report the risks. So it's not just reporting when something's gone wrong. It's about that prevention side of it as well, which is really important. And obviously trying to reduce the risk in the future and put things right whilst they can.
Jenny, without giving away any telling tales out of school, but can you just give us a couple of examples of sort of near misses, the sort of things that have been avoided, but where you could see potential issues? I mean, we talk about cleaning now. Obviously, that's a huge part of your remit, healthcare.
I mean, for us, the health and safety within our organisation covers massive spans. But in relation to FM, I think it's it's reporting, it's staff in those buildings taking ownership. So if you see something that's not right, don't just wait for an estates person to be on site or a health and safety person to be on site to pick it up. If you see it, report it. And do something about it and take that ownership. And then, again, it's if you see something kind of like a maintenance wise, like the floor, we've touched on the floor, haven't we? Or, and it's looking a bit unstable. We have lots of car parks on old hospital sites that are uneven. Well, if you as a staff member see something that is cracked, or, after the snow, there's a pothole or something that's appeared, don't just assume someone else is going to report that. Take that upon yourself to do, because you reporting it earlier could prevent it from becoming worse. And then that leads to, for us as well, our elderly people on our sites, shuffling down the car park. That's when they trip and that's when they fall. So for us, it's that report, that near missing. If you can see something and you can predict it's going to get worse, then report it earlier on.
Brilliant. Phil, I mean, that's obviously a huge part of your remit, is this idea of, is it called health and safety behavioural? I can never remember the phraseology.
Yeah, the behavioural
framework.
Yeah. I mean, it's an area of ongoing development and behaviours, and exactly as Jenny said, it's about empowering people to realise that they can make a difference. I've had instances where someone will complain that an extension cable's being placed across a floor in a meeting room. And you go, well, what did you do about it? Well, I reported it. Well, why didn't you move it? Why didn't you report that actually maybe the plug that it's sourced from is in the wrong location? Because when it was designed, and aesthetics and design is obviously, to Chris's point earlier, aesthetics and design play a huge part in this, because an architect or a board member's vision of how their wonderful offices are going to look don't always marry to the reality of use. The nice shiny floor is great, but people slip up over it. Might look good, but it's not very practical, and we see this, and I'm sure FMs out there see this on a regular basis. So there's more about a conversation, empowerment, getting people to feel that actually they can make a difference, they should make a difference. And it goes to what I said before, your brother's keeper. I've had instances in the past, and it frustrates me when someone says, oh, yeah, that nearly happened to me. Well, what do you mean it nearly happened? Why didn't you say something? Well, I thought somebody else was going to say it. Well, I thought somebody already knew. And then you get the, oh, well, it's waiting for the FMs to deal with it. That's one that I think is really unfair, because the FMs may be waiting because of funding or, plan or whatever. But actually, I would argue that 80% of what gets raised is stuff that could have been actioned and dealt with there and then by the people who have observed it. And I think we still have a bit of an education piece there to drive that culture of ownership, responsibility, and doing to intervene. Because it is,
Yeah.
the days of, oh, it's the health and safety department, or it's the FM's responsibility, that's gone. Yes, they are conduits, but they're not always the doer. The doer can be the person who reports.
Brilliant point. Nick, you see a lot of clients. You must go to some places and think, oh dear God, because you talked earlier about the corporate thing. I don't need to diss your clients. That's what I'm asking. But this idea that there must be very, very different safety cultures and also design. As Phil said, sometimes the way places are designed, you think, well, that's an accident waiting for to happen.
Yeah, so we work in a really diverse range of environments, right? We work in lovely, shiny office buildings and city centres to, like Jenni was saying, public sector buildings which are in desperate need of investment, and infrastructure buildings in far-flung, remote parts of the UK that maybe only get a visit from an engineer once a year. So really diverse, and it's important that we've given our staff that agency to report hazards and near misses via an open source electronic reporting system, which has really helped, right? We get thousands of hazards reported every single month. And it's really interesting what Phil said there, about 80% could have been closed out at the time. We're running at about 85%, which are closed out by the person who reports it. So that correlates quite well. And a really important piece of feedback that we got from our frontline staff was, I'm quite happy to report anything you want me to, but I get frustrated when I report things and they're not fixed. So we changed the workflow in our hazard reporting system so that once a hazard is reported, it goes to a supervisor or a manager who's in charge of that area, and then they have to put a comment in to say, okay, job's been raised, or I'll get an engineer to look at it later today. And that feedback loop then reinforces that behaviour to say, okay, I now know somebody's looked at it, or I now know we're waiting for a part, it's going to take 6 weeks. So then they're encouraged to do it again, rather than just going into a black hole and nobody knowing, the reporter not knowing when the hazard's going to be fixed. So that's worked really well. And the other thing I always say to our leaders is, provide reward and recognition. You've got to complement the day-to-day good stuff. You've got to celebrate success. You've got to acknowledge that individual has gone out of their way to do something positive for our customer, for our team, for a member of the public, and that must be recognised. So a small thank you or something a little bit more, a little bit bigger, should the situation warrant it, then our leaders should be doing that, because our customers need them to do that. Right? We're custodians of their building, and it takes all of our team to keep that building going and really make sure it's as safe as it can be.
That's an excellent point. It's that idea, because the actual premise of health and safety is to stop bad things happening. And that the problem is that it's like the news. People don't report good things. They report when the bad things have happened. So the people think, oh, someone else has stored it and walked past. Chris, I wanted to go back a little bit to some of the data. There was another issue that came up, and it was the misuse of material handling equipment. Had caused a lot of problems as well. What was sort of the scenarios that kind of covered?
Yeah, well, really, it was the size and weight of this equipment is what poses a threat a lot of the time when people are walking into the path of the equipment. So simple things like line marking and signage make it a lot easier for demarcation of where the equipment should be or where the people should be walking. Storage areas and things like that. I mean, a lot of the time it's often just a case of machinery and people fighting and vying for the space within a small working environment a lot of the time. Holes and cracks on the floors, so forklifts or pallet trucks or what have you, if they're being pulled or pushed or driven along, cracks or spalled edges in expansion joints on concrete can quite easily just shift that equipment slightly. And for anyone that's visited manufacturing sites, distribution warehouses, etc., the amount of damage and scuffs that you see on the bollards, the barriers around the facilities, I mean, that's a sure sign that the importance of having those barriers or what have you, but the misuse or maybe even the lack of training for people using this equipment around the facility, and there's barriers that have been damaged or what have you. Could someone have been standing there at the time? So yeah, it's lots of those areas.
This is a huge amount to cover now. Next question, Jenni. We've sort of talked a bit about the main things that people need to identify within healthcare. Any other bits that you would kind of flag up?
Okay, so I mean, for us, the biggest is water safety. In low Legionella, working from a lot of old buildings, this is a problem, and managing that can be difficult in some of our sites. And I think the other one for us, and particularly what my guys on the ground are struggling with, is keeping our buildings compliant. With health and safety regulations, statutory compliance, and also, keeping on top of our backlog of maintenance, but working in particularly challenging financial constraints. So that is, a big thing for us, weighing up what we have to do, what we can do, what can wait for a little while, and all at the same time trying to balance the books with that as well. So, and then just, one of the other things I just need to touch is violence and aggression. That is another thing for us as an organisation as a whole. Our FM staff see it as well. I mean, but we also have responsibility for our clinical teams going out as well. And as someone alluded to earlier, there has been a huge rise in violence and aggressive incidents within our sector. So, yeah.
That is such a shame. And there's something that came up actually on the news this morning about retail. The retail sector is just people, shoplifters just coming in, lifting stuff and walking out again. So I wanted to talk just for a moment about the different specific health and safety risks within certain areas. Now, commercial offices is the one that usually you think is going to be the safest place. But Phil, are there particular issues that come up for you when you're looking at the sort of dangers in a commercial office?
Absolutely. I mean, the one, we worked with a few clients in the last sort of 12 months who were in London, and it's scooter batteries. People coming in on scooters with lithium batteries and wanted to charge them in the office. And you just think, well, all right, they're charging something. This is lithium. We know the issues around it, and we worked with one particular client to develop solutions that reduce the risk. Well, it doesn't eliminate it completely, but reduces the risk, because you can't. The reality in commercial offices is if you start banning the people bringing these things in, for a fact that they'll come in a different way, or something will happen, and you've got a fire risk. And I'm sure for those FMs who are faced with this, it's a headache all the time, because you can't police it. In reality, you've got to manage it. So I think that for me has certainly come up as a key issue over the last 3 years, sort of post-pandemic.
What about you, Nick? What would you say when you're dealing with clients? What is their sort of, you said there's lots of very different kinds of environments that they're in.
Yeah, it just sort of, I was just thinking then about some of the good catches or areas that we've worked with customers on recently. We had a serious incident in a manufacturing environment overseas, and every ISS country was tasked to go and check the manufacturing areas where they were working. And we worked with one of our customers in the Midlands to do a joint walk around looking at guarding some of the machinery, and we found a couple of areas which needed improvement. So taking that proactive steps with our customer was really good, because we were both on the same page about the actions that we needed to take. And then another one, which from a facilities point of view may not apply to everybody, but certainly in education, a massive and healthcare actually, a massive risk for us currently is allergens. Where we have food services, and education, where we have special diet menus for children, is a real risk focus area for us at the moment. The consequences of getting it wrong can obviously be fatal, and really understanding the process, the training that we give our people, working closely with parents and schools and the hospitals, working closely with the nursing staff and the ward staff to make sure that allergens are appropriately controlled. Is a real focus area for us at the minute, and it should be for FMs, but they've got food services.
Good point. Phil, what about we've talked a bit about the manufacturing plants, retail. Obviously, it's a violence thing, but there must be also sort of more physical retail issues, like those big shopping centres where, you know.
Yeah, I think with that, one of the challenges I think is demarcation. Who's responsible for what? We work with a couple of shopping centres where
Yeah.
the lines aren't blurred, but they're a little bit okay. So you'll have a common supply corridor that people bring their stock in, that's managed by the centre, but then the stock is actually owned by the shop, and therefore you've got slips, trips, and falls. You've got the fire risk. You've got behaviours again. It goes back to that
Yeah.
stakeholder behaviour piece I mentioned earlier. Understanding, whose responsibility is it to clear this stuff up? And I know FMs who really struggle, and they have a slog of a job to make sure that all the stakeholders, be it customers who are coming on site and the store owners, know that what they're doing has an impact. How do they redesign their space? What impact that's going to have on football? So yeah, there's a lot of competing challenges, I would guess, there that need to be understood. And I don't think it's necessarily saying, oh well, there's a solution. I think the first bit is actually really understanding what are we dealing with here.
Good
Who's
point.
responsible for what?
Yeah.
Understanding, okay, that's going to be you, that's going to be us, we're going to do. And yeah, people draw up contracts and everyone's happy that the contract says, but invariably, it doesn't say the level because it doesn't necessarily think about this nuanced stuff. So having those conversations and understanding and being clear, I think, is a fundamental part.
Excellent point. In fact, it brings me neatly to ask Chris another questions. But first of all, a reminder, if anyone's got questions or want to share their experiences, do let us know. Chris, I think one of the things that was also quite worrying about your research, I keep coming back to this, but there's some really good data in there. A lot of respondents didn't feel confident employees were aware of potential hazards and how to control or report risks. Now, we've talked a lot about people having the initiative. For instance, Jenni saying if you're walking across the car park and you go, but what kind of issues were they having? Like things like repairs, especially that have been left, and you're going, well, I must mention that,
Yeah, and like you say, it's a huge variety of reasons. And they came back with examples such as budget cuts, lack of training, or even the lack of regular site reviews and audits. So, I mean, with Watco, we offer a visual site inspection form. Something that we mocked up for FMs to walk around their site and to make sure that everything is covered. With the car park or loading bay areas, all sorts of different areas. And the research, it was a third agreed that employees, sorry, should I say only a third agreed that the employees are aware of potential hazards and know how to control them or report the risks as well.
Actually, Phil, I was going to ask you about this as well. I mean, I think you guys obviously are trying to improve employee safety training. Now, most people, whenever they start a new job, they get induction and stuff like that. With hybrid working, it complicates things even further. If you had you do have the ear of the government, hopefully, on this, what would you say were the main priorities to improve employee safety training? And for our delegates who are watching this, what would you tell them right now if they're going, well, we really need to sort out our employee? Where should we start?
All right. Well, I mean, there's two parts to that question. So
Yeah.
first, I mean, from a sort of government point of view, we're a strong believer that training should start early. You need to be training the new generation. A point of fact that I think we all recognise, we have 5 generations in the workplace now. 5 generations, that's the most we have ever had. So there's a big challenge in there. So training people to perform, again, it goes that cultural thing and behavioural stuff. Training people to perform in the way you think and you want them to do. The days of saying, if something happened, we'll retrain, but all we'll do is we'll shout at them and tell them the same thing in a different way. They've gone, because we have to be more intuitive. We have to be using a lot of initiatives about how we do that. So training at a younger age is important. Point. Bringing in apprentices, getting apprentices trained up. We've lost a huge amount in that. The older workforce are in. I mean, the latest stats, 34% of workplace fatalities affect those with people over 60. I mean, that's a horrible statistic. But the other thing as well is and it's difficult, and you mentioned a hybrid. The access to training is different now. We used to have classroom training. We used to have, okay, you'll go away for a week and you do all your training packages and you'll cover everything you need to do. But we now need to, again, we need to be innovative about how we do things. It's not necessarily about finding the right venue and the right trainer. It's finding the right means of delivery.
Right.
So, you do your basics. So the second part of your question, you do your basics, you get your awareness in there. But I think part of that awareness has to be, and it goes back to what we've said a number of times on this presentation, it's about empowering your stakeholders, making people feel confident that they are part of the solution. You know, the near miss reporting, near miss reporting, when you start doing that, it's going to be not so good. And the numbers are going to be high. But actually, the more you stick with it, the better the reports come through and you get less of them. So actually, in the longer term, there is benefit to it. So there's a whole piece around making sure that you've identified what your training needs are. But I think what is important when you do that is making sure it's appropriate training to the need.
Good point. Yeah.
Don't get off the shelf big packages that have 40% applicability and the rest of it is just bluff and bluster and not relevant to the person, because the problem is they will remember the stuff that's not relevant to them more than they'll remember the stuff that's relevant to them. So you have to be smarter about it. And there are plenty of providers out there, hands up, we are one of the providers, obviously, that can do that, you know, that look at tailoring to your particular needs. So I would say, I would encourage people, don't just take what's off the shelf as a definite, really interrogate, does this meet what we need? Is it ticking all the boxes for what we want to expect? But also, is it suitable for the audience that it's going to go to? Because often that can be a big barrier that it's not easy to overcome.
That's a really, really useful tip. I mean, Jenni, obviously, you talked about your staff and some are working in solo. So how on earth do you ensure the continuity of health and safety training and skills?
Okay, I mean, so for us, it's actually something we're quite proud of. We have regular newsletters that are published across the organisation. We have guidance documents. So whenever any kind of new legislation or new research is done, the team will produce a document and we send that out to staff for them to read. We do it in lots of different ways, because people don't always want to read a document, do they? So we do it, some videos that are recorded and sent out to staff. We do newsletters, bulletins. We also have a big focus is our health and safety team are on the ground and they are getting out to sites and getting face to face with teams, going to team meetings and getting those messages out there. We also do regular reviews of incidences and share the learning from that as well. So then people can get those real time scenarios, and as Phil said, it's more applicable to them that way, isn't it? And then the other thing is innovation. We are always looking for new ways to deliver our messages and get that knowledge out to staff. So we're continuously looking at different ways of delivering training that suits people's learning styles and things like that. And it's engagement from your senior leadership team as well. You need to be pushing this message from the top. And staff need to see that it filters all the way through the organisation. So
that's brilliant. Nick, I wanted to ask you actually about the innovation stuff, because I know ISS has got a number of solutions, database solutions that you use. And can you give us a bit of an overview of that?
Yeah, sure. So to be a successful FM, you've got to have the data readily available to you to help support your customer and your teams, right? Because like any big organisation, we've got lots of different systems, and an FM hasn't got time to go to sort of 6 different places to find information for their clients. So what we've tried to do is bring everything together into a series of sort of set dashboards, pulling data from across the business, and that could be for everything from food safety to open audit actions from internal audits or inspections, incident data or compliance information. So So an FM's got one golden source of truth that they can look at and then support their customer because they've identified the gaps or identified trends that might be happening over a period of time. They can work with their customer to identify where those gaps and risks are and putting plans in place to close them. But it's not just having the data, it's about then knowing what do I do, right? Because we know an FM's job is wide ranging, it covers everything within a built space environment. So signposting then to say, okay, my team need training, here's a full training matrix that you can go and look at to say, okay, what's the hazard? What do I need to tell my team to, where can I find a supplier to come and help my customer with this, or a contractor, or where's the form for that? So we've signposted then from our dashboards into our management systems to provide them with guidance that they need. And a lot of those dashboards are available to our customers too, right? Because the customer wants to know 24/7, especially in a global organization that we work with. I want to be able to check my compliance or see my building on a page any time, day or night. So these dashboards are available for customers as well to access, at any time, day or night.
Excellent. We also heard in terms of the research about this budget cuts issue. I mean, Chris, you find 23rd% found that a general maintenance repair poses safety risks. How do your clients, how are they, or the FMs you've dealt with, how are they being able to persuade stakeholders you need to invest in this? Again, as like I said earlier, it's this idea of you're investing to stop something bad from happening, and they're going, oh, are they seeing it as like, oh, we've got time to pay for that, we'll get it in next year's budget or 6 months' time? How can they be persuaded that this is something that's far more important than that, and they need to investing up front?
Yeah, and there's lots of conflicting priorities always. I mean, more recently we've had obviously national insurance increases for companies and businesses. Over the last couple of years, we've had the national living wage increases. So all of these are stretching budgets for companies, but the health and safety is critical because it's sometimes it can be a matter of life or death, or certainly people's lives and injuries. So just the highlighting to stakeholders is critical. The data alongside the health and safety executives' annual report show obviously the consequences of not prioritising health and safety and the impact that can have. And reduction of budgets might mean fewer staff members, which then makes repairs reactive rather than proactive for that as well. And it's just not to use a pun or so, but it's a slippery slope going down there as well. So yeah, it's huge impact, but it is just fighting the corner on facilities managers and the health and safety side of it, and the impacts and consequences that can have on fines or even closing sites or facilities down as well.
Absolutely, that's a good point. I mean, Phil, that is actually brings in your campaign to put health and safety at the heart of economic growth. And so it's sort of just drilling down to that. How can FMs convince sort of stakeholders that proactive maintenance is not a necessary evil, but is it's not, as I said earlier, it's not, oh, we'll stop that thing from happening, but also this shows a positive environment for people to work in and for people to visit.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the arguments that if we don't do it, we could get prosecuted, has no validity. Okay?
Yeah.
And I've had conversations with many boards and finance directors that say, well, I could get the financial ombudsman on my case. So what? Why do I need to do this? And I think you're right. The difficulty is trying to demonstrate what may happen when you can't actually quantify that. Someone might have an accident and that could cost us £6,000, £600,000, but it's a nonsense in reality. So I think, and I do strongly believe in this, is you need to change the narrative with people. You need to be talking about the impact outside of this. We're talking about disruption. We're talking about impact when things break down and have to be replaced, and the impact, because these are tangible things.
Yeah.
Social media now, we all know that everyone's got their phone and wants to have their moments of glory. Bad publicity impacts businesses, people's perceptions of businesses. That has an impact. People's willingness to work for you, and that's a clear one. Somebody wants to join a company, goes to Glassdoor and discovers they've had 15 accidents. They're going to start being a bit, oh, actually, do I really want to work? So it can impact talent that you want for your business to grow. There's all sorts of periphery issues that I think we should not be afraid of bringing into the mix to convince people, actually, this is good health and safety is good business, right?
Yeah.
That is the bottom line to it. It will help your bottom line. How? In a number of different ways. It doesn't have to be, well, it'll stop you being affected by prosecution. And I think the other thing that's the hidden, well, I want to call it an enemy, but it's not an enemy. It's the investors, it's the insurance companies. How many insurance companies now are making mandatory requirements to do certain things? Now, why they do that, I'll leave it to other people's judgment. But I think we're quite aware that there is an impact there that is going to have financial damage to organisations. So I don't think we should be worried too much about the necessary evil. Yeah, it's something we have to do, but it has an impact on a number of different levels, and we should be looking and focusing on them just as much. I'm not saying that the people aspect of it disappears completely. It's fundamental to it. We don't want to injure people or what we do, but we need to be living in the real world. And FMs will be fighting for budget access in the same way as every other department. And it is tough. And I'm not going to say it is, but we need to be using different tools. We need to be a lot more innovative about the tools that we use to make that case.
Brilliant. There's a question. I'm going to look at some of the questions that have come in because it ties in a bit to some of the things I was going to ask. Somebody's asking, how soon should a repair be made? What is deemed too long? And that's Jenni, I'm going to throw that one at you first. I was actually going to ask you, how do you prioritize repairs across the portfolio? And again, in healthcare, that must be an absolute juggling act.
It is. So first of all, in that kind of prioritization, we'll look at what type of site it is. Is it a clinical site? Is it a bedded unit? Or, obviously if we've got vulnerable patients involved. So all of these considerations come in. So I'd say the way we risk assess. If it's a small little reactive job, the teams, we have property managers, they know they have the power to go ahead and do those. Anything over a certain amount, it has to come for a central team where it's risk assessed, but it's also having a conversation with your peers as well, because what you can think is important, someone can give you a different view on it as well, and maybe come up with a different solution as well. So we do a lot of that within our department. We talk to each other and get feedback off each other. So that's another way. I mean, but predominantly for us, it's risk assess. What is the risk if we don't do this? What is the knock on to that? But patient areas will always take priority over an office.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That one to you as well, Nick, because your client base again is very varied. Do they have issues if they say, look, we need to do an audit, but we're not sure where to start or where we need to concentrate our resources given budgetary constraints?
They obviously have budgetary constraints, right? It's FM our FM customers, like I said before, that they're depending on which segment we're talking about. They've either got a sort of dilemma with return to the office, so they're thinking about how do we restack buildings or how do we get rid of some land and bring people together into one building. And we work a lot in education areas and in the NHS, which have their own budgetary constraints. But we work really closely with our customers on asset life cycle, on their building fabric, to understand, right, what areas of investment would really work best for you in the short term, medium term, long term, in line with their strategic goals, because their heads of estates and main customers have got sort of aims and goals that they want to achieve. So we really partner with them to help them achieve that and work out which areas of their estate need priority investment, and then help deliver those projects and maintenance activities to to deliver that for them. So it's really about working hand in hand with the customer, but bringing the skills that we have as an FM provider to say, right, a bit like Jenni said, have you thought about that? Let's have a look at this part of your estate. Right, we've got this amount of money. What's best for investment, first of all, based on our experience and what we do with other customers as well. But it looks very different across our different segments.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, you must get this with clients saying, we know we've got this, this, and this to do. Do you then advise them and go, well, we would start with this. This is crucial.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the word excuse came up before, or time and things like that in the last hour or so. But we, on a product side of it, when we're talking to customers, the innovation side that we work on for our products is feedback from our customers, and time is one of those, or ease of use of those products. So if you've got some broken up concrete or something that's been dropped on it that's broken up and caused a pothole or a trip hazard, we've got products that can cure and accept forklift traffic within 2 hours. So it's not a case of weeks or days or months or whatever it is, where that pothole has to stay there. Put a cone or cone the area off. And we have products again on the anti-slip side of it as well, paints and coatings that can dry in very cold conditions down to minus 20. So we're trying to push the innovation of the products to help meet the requirements of customers for health and safety reasons as well. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Now, I've got a question here. Actually, it came up earlier about hybrid working. It's sometimes a struggle to find people to fill fire warden and first aid roles. What can be done to ensure there's a covered? If you've only got, like it used to be, you had people in 5 days a week, and you'd have your, back in the day, you had your fire warden and you somebody blah blah and such department does first aid. How on earth are you supposed to cope now? Phil, I'll go to you first because you've got the overview on this. Look at you.
I mean, it is a difficult issue. Let's face it, the same way first aid at work is. A lot of places that we've been to, they've taken a pragmatic solution. If it's a low risk by a low risk organisation, what they've done is they said, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to train everybody in the basics of how to manage, and a recognition that a senior person, whoever the most senior person is on site at that time acts as the lead and directs people, that everybody knows this is the procedure you follow. And if the lead person isn't in, somebody else takes over and does it. It's about communication and evacuation. When you're talking about higher risk, the reality is that most of those organisations will have a majority of their workforce back in, because the higher risk organisations are the ones that are actually manufacturing. And most manufacturing operations are back to near pre-pandemic levels anyway. So I don't think it's necessarily that sector. It's more likely, like what we found is it's the commercial offices sector, and it's about yes, okay, the rules were very clear about number of fire wardens to number of employees and all this type of stuff, but everybody recognises the world is different now, and you have to find a solution that works for you. I think what indicates a move forward is people aren't just shrugging their shoulders and saying, I don't know what the solution is. They're actually finding ways to do it. And I think we have to accept that if that's where we're at, then that's a positive. It's not a negative. It's people trying to find solutions. And I think that's the situation as it stands now. How that's going to look in 12 months' time, I don't know. More and more companies are pushing towards 3-4 days in the office for a variety of different reasons. That move changes the dynamic again. That might be successful, it might not be successful. There's so many different factors, but constantly being in a position where you say, well, look, we're going to review it. We're going to keep on reviewing it, because although there was a requirement to do it, I think a lot of companies would admit they didn't do, when they reviewed it, they didn't do a deep dive review. They did it just a very quick, oh yeah, we've got the same number of people, that's fine, move on. Now there's more of a need to actually go, that's not going to be enough. We need to start looking and really making sure that we haven't just assumed Jenni's always in on a Wednesday. Actually, Jenni might not be in on a Wednesday now. She may only be on a Friday.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a change in that respect, but it's going to be constantly moving. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure where it'll land, but we'll just have to see.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. We're nearly out of time. One last, like literally one line answer each. The last question that's come in here is how is it possible to have safety considerations ready when required? What I suppose what they mean by that is what steps would you take to ensure, what would be the sort of priorities for you, I suppose, to ensure health and safety? The number one thing, if anybody comes away from this and goes, right, what do I need? Where do I start? And that's a huge question for a one-line answer, but give it a go. Nick, you've come out. Come on, you go first.
Okay. If there's one thing that I would
Mm,
say
yeah,
to someone coming away from this is be a leader, right?
right.
Lead on health and safety.
Mm,
Understand the shadow that you cast.
yeah,
Walk the walk. Don't just talk the talk, and lead by example. And if you don't know something, that's okay. I don't expect the FMs that work for ISS to know every single part of every single piece of legislation, right? That's not what we employ them for.
mm,
But reach out for help if you need it because it can be bad.
that's great. Phil, we'll go back to you.
I'm going to use two phrases. One is risk assessment, is good risk assessment will identify what your priorities are, and defensible decision making. Why did you make that decision? Because that's something that everybody has to face every day. And I think if you start from that point, it will help you focus on where your safety priorities are because you can defend why you've decided that's where your priorities are.
Excellent. Jenni?
I'm actually going to give you two words. I'm going to say communication, and I'm also going to say keep an eye on your near misses.
Excellent. And Chris, I know you've issued some useful sort of guides to this, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so they're quick and simple guides just to try and cover off everything within a facility. But reiterate everybody's points really: communication and taking responsibility. Don't just leave it for someone else to pick up. Absolutely.
brilliant. Thanks, guys. That was really good. The time seemed to go very fast for me, and I'm sure I didn't cover everything, so maybe we'll have to have a rematch. Um, in the meantime, if anybody's got any queries or wants any more feedback, do let us know. We'll be posting this webinar up on the website for those who joined us late or weren't able to make it live. And I just wanted to thank the panel again, Chris, Jenni, Phil, and Nick, for their time and their expertise. Thanks very much, guys.